July 7th, 1968, 6:47 a.m. Frank Lucas got the call. 2 words. He's gone. Bumpy Johnson, the godfather of Harlem, the man who taught Frank everything, dead at 62. Heart attack. No warning, just gone. Frank sat on the edge of his bed, phone still in his hand, staring at nothing. His wife, Eva, touched his shoulder. "Baby, what's wrong?" "Bumpy's dead." The room went silent, because everyone in Harlem knew what Bumpy's death meant. War. When a king dies, every wolf in the city starts circling the throne, and Bumpy Johnson's throne was worth $50 million a year in heroin, numbers, and protection money. Frank stood up, started getting dressed. Eva watched him. "Where are you going?" "To the bank." "Frank, it's not even 7 in the morning. I need to withdraw money." "How much?" Frank looked at his wife. "Everything I have." 3 hours later, Frank walked out of Chase Manhattan Bank carrying a briefcase. Inside was $150,000 in cash, every dollar he'd saved in 15 years working for Bumpy Johnson, his entire life savings. Eva was waiting in the car. Her hands were shaking on the steering wheel. "Frank, what are you doing with that money?" "I'm taking it to Bumpy's funeral." "You're going to give away everything we have?" Frank lit a cigarette. "I'm not giving it away. I'm investing it." "In what?" "In becoming king of Harlem." Eva stared at him. "Baby, you're Bumpy's driver. Nobody even knows your name." "They're about to. Because here's what nobody understands. When Bumpy died, every gangster in New York started making plans. The Italians, the Irish, Nicky Barnes and his crew, all of them thinking the same thing. Harlem's up for grabs. But they're all wrong." Frank took a long drag. "Because I'm walking into that funeral with $150,000, and I'm making a statement nobody can ignore." "What statement?" "That I'm not Bumpy's driver anymore. I'm Bumpy's successor. And if they want Harlem, they're going to have to go through me." Eva shook her head. "They're going to kill you." "Maybe, but at least I'll die as somebody, not as the guy who carried Bumpy's bags." The funeral was at Abyssinian Baptist Church, the biggest church in Harlem. Could hold 2,000 people, and every seat was taken. Gangsters in the front rows. Carmine Tremonti from the Lucchese family, Joe Colombo, Crazy Joe Gallo, Nicky Barnes with his entire crew, all of them dressed in expensive suits, pretending to mourn while secretly calculating how to divide Bumpy's empire. Frank walked in late, on purpose, wearing a black suit, black tie, black fedora, carrying that briefcase. Every head turned. "Who's that?" "Oh, that's Bumpy's driver." People went back to their conversations. Nobody took Frank seriously. He was nobody. The help, the errand boy. Frank didn't sit down. He walked straight to the front of the church, to Bumpy's casket, set the briefcase on the floor, opened it, and the church went silent. If you want to see what Frank does next, hit that subscribe button right now, because what happens in the next 60 seconds changes organized crime forever. Frank reached into the briefcase, pulled out a stack of $100 bills, $10,000, placed it on Bumpy Johnson's chest, inside the casket. The entire church froze. What was he doing? Frank pulled out another stack, $10,000, placed it on the casket, then another, and another, and another. 15 stacks, $150,000 in cash, stacked on top of Bumpy Johnson's body. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Frank Lucas had just put his entire life savings into a dead man's casket in front of 2,000 people. Then Frank turned around, faced the entire church, faced every mobster, every gangster, every killer, and he spoke. His voice was calm, quiet, but it carried through the church like thunder. "My name is Frank Lucas. For 15 years, I worked for Bumpy Johnson. I drove his car. I carried his bags. I watched. I listened. I learned." He gestured to the casket. "Bumpy Johnson taught me one thing above everything else. In this life, respect is everything. You can have all the money in the world, you can have all the power, but if you don't have respect, you have nothing. Frank looked directly at the Italian mobsters in the front row. When a king dies, you don't let him go into the ground empty-handed. You send him off like royalty. So that's what I'm doing. I'm giving Bumpy $150,000, every penny I have, because that's what respect looks like. The church was dead silent. Carmine Tremunti's face was unreadable. Nicky Barnes looked confused. Frank continued. Now I know what all of you are thinking. You're thinking, who's gonna run Harlem now? Who's gonna take over Bumpy's operation? He pointed at the Italians. You think it's gonna be you? You think you're gonna walk into Harlem and take what Bumpy built? He pointed at Nicky Barnes. You think it's you? You think you're next in line because you've got a crew and a reputation? Frank shook his head. You're all wrong, because Bumpy didn't build this empire for any of you. He built it for Harlem, for his people, for the community, and he left it to me. The church erupted, mobsters standing up, shouting. Nicky Barnes jumped to his feet. You're nobody, Frank. You're a driver. Frank didn't raise his voice. I was a driver. Now I'm the king. And here's how I know. Because I just put $150,000 into that casket. Not one of you can do what I just did. Not one of you has that kind of loyalty, that kind of respect, that kind of guts. Carmine Tremunti stood up slowly. You got balls, kid, I'll give you that. But balls don't run Harlem. Connections do, soldiers do, money does. Frank locked eyes with him. I just showed you I have money. I'm about to show you I have soldiers. And connections? Bumpy was my connection. He taught me everything, how to move, how to think, how to survive. And most importantly, he taught me that Harlem doesn't belong to outsiders. It belongs to us. Tremunti's jaw tightened. You're making a mistake. No, you're making a mistake if you think I'm bluffing. Frank turned to address the entire church. Starting today, Harlem runs itself. No more tribute to the Italians. No more 20% off the top. No more white mobsters telling black men how to run their own neighborhood. If you want to do business in Harlem, you come to me. You ask permission. You show respect. Or you don't do business at all. The church was in chaos now. Mobsters arguing, people shouting. But Frank Lucas didn't care. He'd already won. He turned back to Bumpy's casket, placed his hand on the wood. Rest in peace, boss. I'm gonna make you proud. Then Frank Lucas walked out of Abyssinian Baptist Church, every eye on him, every mobster calculating whether to kill him or respect him. Frank got into his car. His hands were shaking, not from fear, from adrenaline. Eva was crying. You just declared war on the Italian Mafia, Frank. What were you thinking? I was thinking that if I don't take Bumpy's throne right now, someone else will. And if someone else takes it, I'm just another nobody who spent 15 years driving a car. Eva wiped her eyes. They're going to kill you. Maybe, but they have to think about it first. That's the whole point. Frank lit a cigarette. Every gangster in that church is asking themselves the same question right now. If Frank Lucas can throw away $150,000 like it's nothing, how much money does he really have? How connected is he? How dangerous is he? And while they're trying to figure that out, I'm consolidating power. They drove back to Frank's apartment in silence. When they got inside, the phone was already ringing. Frank answered. Yeah. The voice was Italian, thick accent. Frank Lucas, this is Carmine Tremunti. We need to talk. Frank's blood went cold. Tremunti was the acting boss of the Lucchese crime family, one of the 5 families that controlled New York. If he wanted to talk, it meant one of 2 things, a deal or a death sentence. Talk. Not on the phone. Ralph's restaurant, tonight, 8 p.m. Come alone. The line went dead. Eva looked at Frank. Who was that? The Mafia. They want a meeting. Are you going? I have to. If I don't show, they'll think I'm scared. And if they think I'm scared, I'm already dead. That night, Frank Lucas walked into Ralph's restaurant in East Harlem. The entire place had been cleared, just one table. Carmine Tremunti sitting there with 4 bodyguards. Frank sat down. Tremunti poured 2 glasses of wine. You made quite the scene today. I made a statement. That you did. The question is, can you back it up? Frank took a sip of wine. I just put $150,000 in a casket. That's not backing it up. That's showing off. Tremunti leaned forward. Here's the situation. Bumpy had an arrangement with us. He ran Harlem. We took 20%. Everybody was happy. Now you're sitting here telling me that arrangement is over. That's correct. You got a death wish, kid? I got a vision. And what's that? A Harlem that runs itself. No outside interference, no tribute, no partners, just business. Tremunti smiled. And you think you can hold Harlem without our permission?
I know I can, because I have something you don't have. The people. Harlem trusts me. They knew I worked for Bumpy. They saw me put $150,000 in his casket out of respect. You think you can walk into Harlem and take over? They'll riot. They'll burn every corner you try to claim. But me? They'll work with me, because I'm one of them. Tremunti studied Frank for a long moment. And if we say no, then we go to war. And you'll win that war eventually. You've got more soldiers, more money, more connections, but it's going to cost you. Every block you take, you're going to lose men. Every operation you run, you're going to deal with sabotage. It'll take you years to hold Harlem. And for what? 20% of a business you have to fight for every single day? Tremunti was silent. Frank continued. Or you could let me run Harlem. I stay in my lane, you stay in yours. I don't expand into your territory, you don't interfere in mine. We're not partners, we're neighbors, and neighbors who respect boundaries live longer. Tremunti finished his wine. You're smart, kid. Smarter than I thought. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you 6 months. 6 months to prove you can run Harlem without us. If you can hold your territory, make money, keep the peace, then we'll respect your independence. But if you fail, if there's chaos, if you lose control, we step in, and we take everything. Deal. Frank extended his hand. Tremunti shook it. 6 months. Don't waste them. Drop a comment right now. Do you think Frank can pull this off? Because what he does next changes everything. Frank walked out of that restaurant alive. That was step 1. Step 2 was actually running Harlem without getting killed, arrested, or overthrown. The problem was simple. Nobody in Harlem took Frank seriously. They'd seen him as Bumpy's driver for 15 years. Now he was claiming to be king. Nicky Barnes tested him first. 3 days after the funeral, Barnes walked into one of Frank's heroin spots on 145th Street, told Frank's dealers they worked for him now. When Frank found out, he didn't get angry, he got surgical. That night, Frank went to Nicky's apartment, knocked on the door. Nicky opened it, surprised. Frank, what are you doing here? Frank pulled out a gun, put it to his forehead. You got 2 choices. You work for me, or I kill you right now. Nicky's eyes went wide. You're bluffing. Frank pulled the hammer back. The click echoed in the hallway. Choose. Nicky stared at Frank, calculating, trying to figure out if Frank was serious. Okay, I'll work for you. Smart. Because here's the deal. You want to be famous. You want to be Mr. Untouchable. Fine. You be the face. I'll be the shadow. You get the glory. I get the money. Everybody wins. That conversation changed everything. Nicky became Frank's public face while Frank operated in silence. But Frank still had a problem. The heroin he was getting from Italian suppliers was expensive and weak. He was paying $50,000 per kilo for product that was only 10% pure. So Frank did something nobody had ever done. He went directly to the source. In 1969, Frank flew to Thailand, then to Vietnam, the Golden Triangle. He met with suppliers, negotiated directly, cut out every middleman, and Frank made a deal. He would buy pure heroin, 95% pure, for $4,000 per kilo. He would smuggle it into America using military coffins. Dead soldiers coming home from Vietnam. The coffins were sealed, sacred, nobody checked them. Frank bribed a few sergeants.
And just like that, he had a pipeline nobody could touch. When Frank's first shipment arrived, he called it Blue Magic, because it was so pure it was magic compared to everything else on the street. Frank's Blue Magic was 95% pure. The Mafia's heroin was 10% pure. Frank could cut his product 9 times, and it would still be stronger than anything in New York. Within 6 months, Frank controlled 80% of Harlem's heroin trade. He was making $1 million per day. He owned buildings, businesses, cars. He was richer than the Mafia. Carmine Tramunti called him back to Ralph's. "How are you doing this?" "Doing what?" "Making this kind of money. We've been in this business for 50 years, and we can't figure out your supply chain." Frank smiled. "That's because you think like mobsters. I think like a businessman. I don't have partners. I have employees. Nobody knows the whole operation except me. That way, nobody can betray me." Tramunti nodded slowly. "You're smarter than Bumpy. Bumpy taught me well." For 5 years, Frank Lucas was untouchable. He made over $100 million, lived like royalty, but stayed quiet, under the radar. Then came the mistake. March 8, 1971, the fight of the century, Muhammad Ali versus Joe Frazier. Frank got a ringside seat, and he wore a chinchilla coat, a $50,000 coat, floor-length fur, flashy, the kind of coat that screams, "I'm rich." Across the arena, a detective named Richie Roberts was watching, and when he saw that coat, he knew. Nobody makes that kind of money legally. Richie started investigating, followed Frank, watched his crew, built a case. It took 4 years, but in 1975, the DEA raided Frank's house. They found $584,000 in cash, heroin, evidence. Frank Lucas was arrested, facing life in prison. And as Frank sat in that cell, he realized the truth. Bumpy had warned him, the moment you want people to know you're rich, you're finished. Stay invisible. The silent man lives. The loud man dies. Frank had stayed silent for 5 years, made $100 million. Then he wore a chinchilla coat to a boxing match, and that one moment of vanity cost him everything. But Frank had one card left. He called Richie Roberts. "I want to make a deal. I'll give you everyone. The Mafia, corrupt cops, the whole operation. Over 100 people." Frank became an informant. His testimony destroyed the NYPD's most corrupt unit, led to over 100 arrests. Frank was sentenced to 70 years, reduced to 15 for cooperation. He served 7, got out in 1981, tried to go straight, worked with kids, became a consultant on American Gangster in 2007. Denzel Washington played him. Frank Lucas died in 2019, age 88, natural causes. And people still ask, was he a hero or a villain? The answer is both. Frank destroyed communities with heroin, but he also proved something. A black man from North Carolina could outsmart the Mafia, could build an empire, could change the game. That $150,000 he put in Bumpy's casket wasn't just respect. It was an investment in a legend. Because 50 years later, people still talk about the day Frank Lucas walked into a church with a briefcase and claimed a throne.
Frank Lucas didn't just break the rules, he rewrote them. Frank once said, "I learned from Bumpy that you can't be half a gangster. You go all the way or you don't go at all." I went all the way. And yeah, I paid for it. But at least I was somebody. At least I was king, even if it was only for 5 years. That $150,000 bought Frank something more valuable than lawyers or safety.
It bought him respect. It bought him a throne. And you can't put a price on that.